Good evening. It is Wednesday, April the 24th, about 9:45 p.m. This is meteorologist Shay Gibson bringing you an update for the Charleston Ocean Racing Association Quicksilver Cup to Hilton Head this Friday. It is scheduled at 4 o'clock p.m. However, we're looking at some inclement weather over the area. Minimize myself here, show you the website. We'll get into the weather in just a minute. I wanted to show you this, where the event date is, the skipper's info. If you want to see last night's video that I posted, it's in the offshore wind and weather section under skipper info. Down here, registration is good through tomorrow night, 6 o'clock p.m. and so it shows the location line and sailing instructions. I'm in discussion right now with Andy and others to determine what the race time may be. It may not be exactly 4 o'clock p.m. And one of the reasons why, if we start looking at our weather here, is this low coming out of Texas right now. This large area of low pressure is going to be gaining some momentum with some Gulf moisture and really drawing a lot of moisture up into our area. As we wake up Friday morning, we're going to have some pretty heavy rainfalls, or some moderate to heavy rainfalls over the area, and those may taper off a little bit, may have a couple of heavy showers throughout the day, and then tapering off later in the afternoon. We thought maybe some of the bulk of the heavier rain would be later in the afternoon. It looks like it's going to break up as this low tracks off to the northeast towards the Ohio Valley. What that does is it puts a low here, and it supplies a westerly or northwest flow down behind this cold front as it tracks off to the northeast. So this is what we're kind of seeing now. Before, we thought there might be a northerly flow with high pressure really driving it behind the cold front, but this low is going to deepen as it heads up to the northeast, which keeps that northwesterly flow, this downslope flow, down through the coastline. So it may start initially west and then back northwest. Let's take a look at the WPC here. The track map for the low. This is Thursday morning, tomorrow morning, and you see the low heading up the boundary towards the Ohio Valley in time. There it is right there, just windward side of the Appalachian Mountains. And then we see all this widespread rains by Friday morning. We're in the warm sector with a lot of rainfall going on. And then as the day goes on, we see this low quickly jolt up to the northeast through the Ohio Valley and off towards the northeast United States. This cold front looks like it's going to be passing through sometime between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock p.m. I'm thinking a little bit on the earlier side, maybe 6 or 7, because the high pressure plus that low, this high over Texas, will be helping to push that northwest flow in and may really get that cold front off the coast pretty quick. Here's a GFS model showing it once again in a little bit of motion here for Thursday. This is Thursday afternoon. You see the low coming up. The GFS actually keeps this low a little bit more towards the Ohio Valley as we wake up Friday morning, and then tracks off to the northeast. And you kind of see a little bit better there in the Tropical Tidbit site. Let's look at the NAM. We're starting to get some higher resolution miles into the picture now, and this is what I'm really waiting on to get some more detail about when this front's going to pass through and if we can get the race started on time or maybe back up a couple of hours to get away from that inclement weather. I think what's behind it's going to be good for everyone. It'll clear out and you'll get some northwest flow. But the NAM 12, now this isn't exact on the precip, and as we get a little further in time into tomorrow, we'll get some higher resolution miles, even higher than this 12-kilometer one, to get some more guidance on the precipitation. But you can see here by Friday morning, we see the rains are really starting to kind of break up over the area. We have a large swath that heads over early in the morning, and then things kind of break up through the day. We get a few more showers later in the day, and then it really starts to break up. This is 2 o'clock p.m., and as we go forward, by about 5 o'clock p.m., it looks like most of the shower activity is ending, and that's the NAM 12. So we're getting some good guidance on a slightly higher resolution miles showing that. Here's the Euro in a little bit of real time, and as we get into Friday right here, this is Friday morning, we get into the afternoon by 2 o'clock p.m., and then by 8 o'clock p.m., the Euro has everything off the coastline, and that west wind really filtering in. So the SPC convective outlook for the day only has a chance of storms, so I think that's going to be earlier in the day, probably in the morning, maybe early afternoon. May have a lingering isolated shower, maybe a rumble or two through mid-afternoon. I think things are going to start to break up after that. The marginal threat is to our north along the Grand Strand and up through the mid-Atlantic, so we don't look like we're going to have any real threat for any significant thunderstorms or severe weather. Here is the GFS. Now this is going into Friday morning, and what we're going to see winds ramping up through the day, so the swell heights are going to come up from the south as well in response to this, ahead of this cold front. And what we're going to see is winds are going to become a little bit aggressive. The miles are going into a little bit more agreement with these winds really coming up from the southwest through the day. So as we get into early afternoon, we're looking at anywhere from 15 to 20 knots. We may see some gusting to 25 knots, especially inside the harbor ahead of this front. Sometimes we get that instability factor. You get a little bit of sunshine here and there, and then you get some high winds. And then the GFS pretty much by evening time. So we're starting to get into the late afternoon hours right here, and we see this westerly flow already starting to make it through, punching through the backside of that cold front. And so the GFS is being a little bit more aggressive with this northwest flow arriving by evening time, and this is what we're looking at. So we're looking at an initial burst of northwest flow about 15 to 20 knots, and maybe even a little bit higher than that. I don't think we're going to surpass that 25 knot mark. I don't think we need any SCA warnings or any advisories, anything just yet. I think it's going to be a nice burst of wind. It might be good to maybe hug the coast a little bit more. You don't want that swell height that's out there to catch you. You want to be a little bit closer to the coast on this kind of a run versus that southwest that we originally talked about last night in the video, where you want to stay a little further offshore. This one you may want to think about heading a little closer into the coast to get out of that swell. Near shore wave heights, let me see if I can get this thing stopped on the right time. So this is Friday morning, and as we go further in time, we see the swell heights coming up. We may be getting up to 4 feet on the swell in the afternoon, and then by the evening time it starts to kind of wind down a little bit, but I'm still saying about 3, maybe 4 foot swells, residual swell left over. As that northwest flow comes, it may start to calm that top swell down, and it backs away from the coast as we get into Saturday morning here. The swell really starts to wind down, but the direction is going to be from the south. So with northwest flow, you're going to be kind of heading into that chop. It's going to be a little bit bumpy on the way down, so just a heads up. Here's sail flow, looking at the model run, and this is from the Fripp nearshore buoy. I'm kind of using that, an offshore buoy, for the guidance here on the modeling. Here's Friday. You see it southwest flow right around this time right here is when the winds are going to switch to the west and then eventually to the northwest. So overnight, you're looking at some pretty gusty winds. Right here, it does show in the model blend. This is more or less the NAM 12 at this point in the GFS blended for this far out, and we're looking at gusts into the gusts say mid to upper 20s. I'm not entirely convinced of that, but it could be overnight. You may see some higher gusting, but it should calm down. Initially, around 9 o'clock p.m. is when it's going to be kind of gusty, and then calming down throughout the night. By the time the morning time rolls around, a nice modest wind with some moderate gusting by 6 o'clock a.m. It should be a nice finish, I would think, in Port Royal Sound with winds lightening out throughout the whole time. And so I think that's going to be a good forecast for now. I mean, we'll continue to watch, and we'll see what happens through tomorrow. I'll get with Andy and others, and we'll talk more shop about what the time slot's looking like for the start of the race and what it's going to look like through the night. But I think for the most part, by late afternoon, things are going to start to break up and clear out. You'll have a pretty strong offshore wind to get down the coast pretty quick, and you should be turning into Port Royal Sound in the morning really nice on that northwest flow. So hopefully that'll help things out. And that's going to do it for this one. I'll go ahead and post this to the website. It'll probably pop up in your YouTube feed. If you've subscribed to me already, you'll get this first. Once it populates and uploads to YouTube, I'll put it on the CORA website. And we'll talk some more shop tomorrow. We'll get the final forecast out, and I'll get with Andy and everyone. We'll talk about what's going to happen here. And until then, keep your eyes on the models. You keep an eye on that precipitation, and when the wind is going to be switching directions, I'll be watching it too. And I'll see you guys tomorrow night. Thank you.